Hey guys, how's it going? Thank you for checking out another one of my Baldur's Gate 3 tips videos. This one is entirely based on tips you guys have given me. I take no credit for these. Thank you to those that commented on my last video. For a guy with less than 200 subs, I really appreciate the support. That video did much better than I anticipated, so thank you again. That said, if you do find this video helpful, hit the subscribe button, leave me a comment, and I'll see you down there. I'd love to hit 500 subs, see if you can help me hit that goal. If you're only interested in a breakdown of the final panel from Hell livestream and all the new details on BG3, this timestamp on the screen now is where you need to go. I'm keeping this video completely free of any narrative spoilers, but you may see some Act 2 footage. Just a warning on that one. So let's start with a quick and easy one from Ryan of Andor. If you're playing a caster, you want to be increasing your main stat. That might be Wisdom for Druids and Clerics, Intelligence for Wizards, so on, so on. You want to get that to 20 as quickly as you can. And the reason for that is it helps you hit your spells. This isn't one I really thought about. Often I kind of just wing it myself. But there is nothing worse than being a bard with low stats, trying to crowd control some enemies, trying to make them sleep, trying to cast Tasha's Hideous Laughter, and just absolutely failing. Get those stats high, hit your spells, make everyone happy. Now this next one's interesting and it's a bit more subjective, but Mick Sparks raises the fair point that if you are using your spells on easy to kill enemies, like using a fireball to kill a 7 HP goblin, you're kind of wasting that skill. Now this one I might debate. I think this is an interesting tip though if you're going to be playing on Tactician, the significantly harder, well I say significantly, hopefully significantly harder difficulty. On that difficulty, I think managing your spell slots is going to be much more vital. Now, when I've played through Act 1 many times, I largely just use spells willy-nilly. I didn't care. I'd throw on that level 2 spell slot on a 7 HP goblin. I'll do it, Mick Sparks. What are you going to do? You can't stop me. But I would then have to rest after every single fight, possibly even long rest. So probably a very good tip from Mick Sparks if you are playing through on Tactician or any difficulty and you don't want to be stopping to rest every 2 seconds, think about what you're using those spells on. Can a simple arrow take out that goblin? It probably can. All right, and on to the OG himself, Albertson's 3. Either way, this guy threw out some really good tips, which I decided to test out some of them. First one, you can throw a health potion. I never thought about throwing a health potion at an ally to heal them. Turns out it works. Now he raises that it has a small amount of splash. I did try to test this out a few times. As you can see here, it kind of works. But I couldn't get it to splash on 2 enemies or an ally in quotes, and an enemy standing right next to each other. So with a grain of salt, that one. Now the next one here, I have found out through watching other content creators that this no longer actually works, but it does work in the early access. So you have 3 weeks to make this go. So if you have a bonus action and some movement at the end of your attack, you can walk behind an enemy, hide, and get advantage on your next attack. Here's a quick clip of me doing it. Unfortunately, this has been removed from the final game, as people who have played it are saying. I think that's good that it's been removed. This is funny. This is very funny, but I don't want to have to do this in every single fight, so I'm glad this one's out. But hey, you got 3 weeks to make it work. Now, Albertson's really hitting us with the forbidden knowledge here on ability scores. This is something I didn't pick up, but if your ability scores are off in terms of being on an odd number, you're not getting exactly what you're paying for. You need to be hitting even numbers to get the next tier. Something to consider when you're speccing out your character. For me, I'm not going to pay too much attention to this, but if you are into min-maxing, this is something you want to look out for. Now, a really nice quality of life improvement here is in the options tab of your settings menu, obviously. You can select what is automatically added to your hotbar. Now, I'm the type of animal that I let everything just stack up in that hotbar. I will have everything under the sun in there, the most useless stuff. And I'm also a hoarder, so I won't use any of it, and it'll sit there all game. So being able to remove these options, take stuff automatically out of my hotbar, or choose what goes in there is an absolute godsend. Something to consider, guys. Take a look. Another quick one while we're looking at the hotbar is your actions, or reactions rather. Reactions and passive features. I hadn't looked at this. Albertson had a friend here who was playing a bard and was automatically using inspiration. That seems odd. I don't know why you would ever want that. As you can see here, I mean, this character only had the reaction, so you can turn it on and off. Look, you want to keep that stuff on, but take a look at what you got in the bar. Make sure it's correct, what you want, how you want to be using it. And hey, if you want to toggle non-lethal, be a nice guy, that's on you. And a quick final one on just some quality of life tips is, I know a few people have mentioned this one to me, is keeping a backpack in your inventory so you can make management easier. This is something I will probably do heading into full release. Again, I'm an animal. My backpack is an absolute mess. I would let myself get to almost full carry weight to the point where I'm over encumbered. Then I just start spam sending stuff to stash. Being able to organize this by throwing potions in a bag, ingredients in another backpack, it'll just clean up your inventory. Again, up to you. Look, my thing is just going to be an absolute mess. At work, my desk is just covered in papers, so I'm sure I'm going to completely ignore this, but hey, you might be able to make some use of it. And the last one from our man Albertson, I didn't actually try this, but if you hold shift and click on an item, you can mark it to sell when you go to a vendor. Now, this next one is not so much a tip, but in the settings menu, there is the karmic dice option. Now, I did have to quickly Google this just to double check, but it is essentially bad luck protection. Now, this was automatically turned on for me. I don't know when this was added or if this has been in the game the whole time, but I'm going to be turning this off. I want the ability to go into a fight, roll badly 5 times in a row, and to get absolutely smashed. Look, this is completely personal preference. I like playing these types of games. Play it as it lays. Play it as it lays. If I'm going to get smashed because of bad rolls, then I'm going to get smashed. But hey, let me know below. Are you going to be turning this off? Are you going to be leaving it on? What are your thoughts? Do you want to be karmically protected from bad rolls happening consistently? Or do you just want to let the dice land where they may? Alright, that brings us to the end of the tips. And now moving on to a bit of a breakdown of the final panel from Hell. If you haven't seen this, I highly recommend going and watching it. It is a few hours long, so it can be quite long, and there are some technical difficulties in there. But I'm going to break down some of the main takeaways for me, and also some information I've picked up from watching other content creators that wasn't quite worked in, but from people who had hands-on experience with the game. Now, the first thing is I want to talk about combat. Combat, I've heard, is more varied as the game goes on. I think a lot of us are getting a bit burnt out in early access. I certainly have, but it's hard when you go through the same combat encounters over and over and you start to know them like the back of your hand. I think combat is going to be really varied for me because I'm going to be going straight into tactician mode. I don't know about you guys, but I love a challenge, and I love a challenge in these types of games where you can really plan things out in the moment. You can take time, survey the battlefield, and sort out exactly how you want to approach a situation. Now, some of the most important feedback I've seen is that there are build-defining items in the game as you work through. Some of these are legendary items, I think they're called in the game. Again, going to have your classic orange, yellowy border. And these will shape the way you build your character. This is something I love. I was a little worried about itemization playing through early access. Again, it was Act 1, so I was kind of expecting something like this, but it's great to hear people confirm that there are items. I haven't seen examples. I haven't seen people talk about examples of exactly what these are, but it's going to be amazing to have something that can define a build or can help you fine-tune your build. I've also heard some of these items are specific to races. Don't know how I feel about that myself. I'd be a little frustrated if I'm playing as a dwarf and I'm walking around finding items for orcs, items for dragonborn, and stuff I just can't use. I'm hoping this is few and far between, but I don't hate the idea of a dragonborn having an item that potentially helps their innate abilities. That could be quite fun. But hey, look, just some food for thought on that one. Now, while on the topic of Act 1, Larian Studios have confirmed that there are 33% more dialogue options and interactions in Act 1. I'm sure some of these relate to the new classes like the Dragonborn and the Orc, but some of the feedback from content creators is that this has brought a lot of freshness to it, which I think is really good for players like myself and some of you guys. I've played through early access maybe 4 or 5 times. I was going to be probably speed running it on release, obviously looking at the decisions I was making, but I was kind of keen just to get through. Knowing that there's new content, fresh content there is going to keep me a bit more engaged and really get me into the game. Further to that, throughout the presentation and from what I've heard again from content creators is that actions matter more than we actually expected. Now, I think we saw this through Act 1, where you'd, meet some characters, make some decisions, and you'd kind of see a little bit of payoff. A lot of that was stuck behind, oh, we'll meet you in Baldur's Gate. Oh, we'll see you later. And what that'll look like. But apparently it is a lot deeper than expected. Now, they showed this off in the showcase, and I'd encourage you to watch it if you're interested. I won't go into any spoilers, but they played through 2 completely separate interactions in Act 2, where somebody was on essentially a more neutral good path, and someone was on a complete evil path. And the scenarios came together in the same space, but were completely separate in the way they were handled. I've also heard another content creator say that they had the exact same interaction and they worked it through in a third completely different way. So it's fantastic to hear that there are so many varied options. There's going to be so much replayability in this game. I absolutely cannot wait. I think as gamers, we've really been burnt by the phrase actions matter over and over from games over the years. And I think a lot of those has been limitations of hardware, limitation of time and storytelling. Larian Studios, I trust to do this right. I think this is going to be a masterclass in how to write narrative stories that have diverging paths. Obviously, at a certain point, they have to come back together. You can't have all these different races, all of these different classes with completely different stories that end on different continents. But it sounds like there is so much variation. The choices and actions you take really do matter, and I'm thrilled for this. They showed off quite a bit of this in the showcase again. Encourage you to look into it and watch it if you're curious. But hey, you're in for a wild ride. Touching briefly on characters, races. Obviously, new races have been announced. I kind of touched on those in my last video as well. If you want to check those out, there's a good breakdown on the community blog. The character creation screens have been completely reworked. So there's been some changes to how those are made. I'm not a huge character creation guy. I like looking at the stats, the background, stuff like that. I don't really care too much about how my character looks because I don't spend a lot of time looking at them. I might spend a lot more time in this game because it looks quite deep. But look, if that's your thing, I am sure you're going to love it. There's a lot of different hairstyles, tattoos, piercings for some characters. And they've also apparently not completely, but they've very heavily reworked Will as an origin character and changed his storyline. Some of the feedback has been quite positive. Apparently Will was, I don't want to say underappreciated, but wasn't people's particular favorite character in early access. And they've, reworked him. They also confirmed Karlach is going to be an origin character available. Some of you probably met her in early access and know of this character. She's essentially a tiefling that was stuck in the pits of hell, is now obviously out, and her storyline is going to revolve around that. And the biggest news, which I'm sure you guys may have heard about, is a character called the Dark Urge. Now, I won't go super in depth on this character because we don't have a lot of information, but essentially this character has, as you might expect from the name, dark urges. In the showcase, they demonstrated some of these. Again, I won't go into spoilers because I want to leave that completely out of it. You can check it out in there if you guys want to see it. But essentially, this character gets options that are just completely fucked up, essentially. You don't have to choose them. I think that's important to note. You don't have to go villainous with this character, but I think if you want to go full murder hobo, or if you want to go just a full scorched earth, which is probably my plan for this character, this is the one for you. Apparently it's a very different story, and it sounds like a hell of a lot of fun. Alright, sticking with the matter of characters, they talked about character rerolling, so there will be a character you meet during the campaign who allows you to reroll your stats. I think those of us in early access may have run into this character. Look, take this how you want it. You can use it, you can not use it. I think it's a good option. I might use it. I prefer to stick with a character if I'm making it. Their explanation for having a reroll mechanic is that this is a very heavily narrative game. They essentially didn't want people being 30 hours into a game that could take 50, 60 plus hours to complete and be a bit disenfranchised with the character, feeling a bit let down, feeling like they have to restart simply because they don't like what they're playing, this option will let them reroll. Let them start again. As I understand, you completely reroll your character, but I haven't seen this. I don't think anyone has necessarily seen what it looks like, so take that with a grain of salt. I think this will be really helpful in the sense of multi-classing. Now, multi-classing has been announced. You're able to multi-class in this game. I'm not an expert on what multi-classing looks like. I've seen some people concerned that with the level 12 level cap, multi-classing is going to be kind of difficult and not particularly useful. But yeah, I guess it depends on the implementation. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts. If you know what the hell multi-classing is, exactly how that'll play out in this scenario, what you think it'll look like, tell me below. Do you think this is going to be successful? I think it's a great option, but I've heard people worried about the level cap, think it's going to be too limiting, really dilute builds. But I'm really curious what your thoughts are. I want to know more about this. I don't know. For me, being able to reroll a character, being able to explore different builds, change things up, I quite like that. I'm still in two minds about it. I do like I said earlier, play it where it lays, but I also don't want to be 40 hours in, unhappy with my character, struggling if I'm especially playing on tactician, struggling with fights because I've built them poorly. I don't know. You don't want to have to play through the same stuff you've done just to get back to where you are for a different class. But again, with the differences in narratives, I'm going to play multiple characters. Coming out of this as well, some quality of life improvements. I'll just mention a couple that I've heard along the way. There's stuff like you get a key tool so that all of your keys go into the key tool, keep them all nice and neat in one space. Apparently you also get a place to store your camp supplies, possibly food supplies, again, so they're not all just sitting somewhere. And when you go back to camp and you're clicking on your bedroll, it'll automatically show all of your camp supplies, whether they're in the chest or whether they're in your inventory. No more going back, sitting in your bedroll, realizing, shit, I don't have enough. Going back, throwing a sausage in your inventory. Coming back, fuck, still not enough. Going back, grabbing a melon. Nah, you're just good to go. It'll all be there. Some of the playtesters also, and I didn't see this in the showcase, I don't believe they showed it off, but there has been an introduction of crafting, which lets you create elixirs, potions, grenades, other items as you'd expect. I'm glad there's a use for some of those mushrooms and random shit I pick up off the side of the road as I'm walking through the game world. I think crafting was to be expected. You know, it's going to be nice to be able to make some of those things, especially if you're playing like a rogue or an archer, being able to build some grenades and arrows that suit your play style. Look, just something else to look at, really. And of course, I kind of have touched on it already. There's different difficulty levels. In early access, we've only had the one. On final release, there's going to be a story-based difficulty mode, a normal difficulty mode, and tactician, which is your hard difficulty mode. I probably don't need to explain story and normal to you guys. Story is just very narrative-driven. You're probably going to breeze through. Normal, I think, is what we've experienced so far. And tactician, that's where it's at. They've told us there's better enemy AI, enemies have better utility options, and there's some slight environmental changes and possibly different enemy varieties through the game. So, for example, during the live stream, they explained you may come into a fight that had one goblin on normal, and in tactician, it'll have two goblins and possibly a third larger enemy. And now you'll have to deal with two separate goblins raining down arrows on you while you're trying to deal with this third large threat. They'll also apparently, I mean, well, this will remain to be seen, but they'll prioritize members of your party. For example, if you have a wizard in the back casting a concentration spell, we're told that they will potentially prioritize attacking that person to try break their concentration. So you'll have to do a better job of protecting your party members. And when I say they have better utility, goblins, for example, that have a bow may then have fire arrows as well as that bow. So they'll have slightly stronger attacks, more options in their toolkit. And the environmental changes, they showed off some of it in the showcase. They had some explosive barrels in an area. Again, this will remain to be seen, but it sounds like the encounters will be taken up a notch, which I really appreciate. And hell, this video has gone a lot longer than I anticipated. If you've made it this far, thank you so much. Again, please subscribe if you like the video. Help me get to that 500 sub number. I'd love to smash that one out. What are you excited for in this game? I'm honestly thinking this is going to be game of the year material. I cannot wait. I was already hyped for this game, but seeing all the information they're pumping out, I am just over the moon. I cannot wait for release. I cannot wait to see what they do with this game. This is a studio I have so much trust in, and I am so supremely ready for this game. The fact that they brought the release date forward gives me more confidence. What studio brings a release date forward, for fuck's sake? Like, if this game is broken on release, it's going to be insane. For anyone watching, if you did watch the showcase and you were a bit worried about some of the technical issues they've had, content creators I've been watching have said that that was purely because they'd organized this giant event on short notice, apparently in an old, like a literal castle. Apparently they organized this in a literal castle. Obviously, I imagine connections in a castle probably aren't great. They've said all the games have run perfectly well. Look, there's likely to be bugs. In a game this large, there's going to be some bugs, but nothing like we saw, no performance issues like we saw on the stream. All right, I will leave you there. Thank you so much again for watching this. I really appreciate it, and I will catch you guys in the next one.